Welcome to the fourth episode of the Connor and Heffernan Show. My name is Mark, my co-host Montana here. Um, we're gonna start off this episode talking a little bit about college football. The playoff field is already set. We've got Georgia, we've got TCU, Michigan, and Ohio State all in the playoffs. We've got, I believe it's Georgia and Ohio State
hmm
playing, and then TCU, Michigan, both of which are very interesting matchups.
hmm
Um, Georgia, obviously, they're looking the part. They are looking like the number one team in the country. Um, they really haven't slowed down very much, and Stetson Bennett has been a big part in that this year. Um, Leading his team to yet another SEC title. I think they dropped 50 points against LSU in the SEC title game. So they did their part. Michigan, as we all know, they started off slow in the Big Ten championship. It was kind of a little bit of a dogfight toward the beginning of that game. They only had a 1 point lead going into half, but they took care of business in the second half. And then TCU lost, but they lost in overtime by 3 points to a really good Kansas State team. What are your thoughts on these matchups? Who do you think is going to come out on top? I think we're going to get two really good games to go into the playoff national championship.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, I remember last season, talking those playoffs as well, and just kind of, our thoughts on that. And I think that this season, in and of itself, is one of the most evenly matched seasons we've seen. Last year, I believe Cincinnati was thrown in the mix. And I'm sorry, but Cincinnati's not a team that to me can get it done in a championship setting. Yes, they made it there, rightfully so. People that diminish, even if you don't have the hardest schedule or you don't play a bunch of, top 25 teams, they did this with UCF a couple of seasons ago. Even if you have that amazing season, people are still going to question your authenticity against the big top tier teams. But
Mm-hmm.
this season, TCU, I would say arguably they made a last, half of the season push to even make it into the top four. They fought to get here against plenty of great teams. Ohio State, a team that I don't know if I thought they were going to be fourth ranked. I thought they might have been first or second, closer to the beginning of the season. So that's another team that had to fight to be here. So we're going to see some really good games. What I think is going to happen is I think we're going to see Georgia versus Michigan in an absolute clash. I think that's going to be our championship game. And at the end of the day, like you said, all credit goes to Georgia. We talked Tennessee. We talked all these teams. We even talked Alabama episode 1, if you can believe that right now. But the team that has stayed consistent and looked the best the whole time has been the Bulldogs. But I've got to give it to Michigan. This is their season. I think that they are that team. And I think that we are going to see a Georgia versus Michigan national championship game. And I think Georgia or Michigan comes out on top. But what I would really like to see is an Ohio State Michigan game.
Yes,
Seeing a
sir.
Big Ten national championship would be, it's almost like it's like you're watching two championship games in one. The Big Ten, the real Big Ten national championship and the national championship. So my hope as a football fan, and I think you might share that hope, is that we see a Big Ten, national championship matchup. But I've got it being Michigan and Georgia, and I've got it being a high scoring game, but I've got Michigan coming out on top.
Yeah, I agree. I'm kind of gonna reverse my prediction on the Ohio State Georgia game. I think Ohio State is gonna make a little bit of a statement, win it in a close one. And I think Michigan's gonna take care of TCU. I honestly do think we're gonna see two Big Ten teams in the national championship this year. And I mean, we've seen it with the SEC in years past where they've gotten two teams into the national championship. I think this year is when the Big Ten comes into the fray when it comes to that. If it comes into fruition, it is arguably going to be the most watched national championship game ever because you've got two marquee names in Ohio State and Michigan, two of the biggest rivals in college football going at it. They had one of the most watched games in college football history. It is one of the most watched games every year. So, yeah, I'm really hoping my prediction comes true, that Ohio State can beat Georgia. But yeah, you've got to tip your hat to TCU. TCU came in, with a new coach. Sonny Dykes is a new coach there, and they go 12-1. Max Duggan was a huge part of that. And in my opinion, he got snubbed to the Heisman, especially after his Big 12 championship performance, because he practically carried the entire team on his back. Um, they looked really good all year. And then of course Michigan. Michigan, it's their first 13-0 season in program history. Their defense is really good, only giving up about 13 points a game, and they're averaging about 40 points a game on offense. So they are one of the more complete teams in college football right now outside of Georgia. So I think it's going to set up for a pretty interesting, you know, Final Four, in terms of matchups. But I'm going to go with Ohio State and Michigan on this one. I think Ohio State can put up some points. I think Marvin Harrison Jr., who is arguably the best wide receiver in college football, I think he's going to make some noise against that Georgia secondary. I think it'll be interesting, man.
Absolutely. I mean, and it always is, like I said, I kind of made reference before that it's been a little uneven in the past. And I'm not going to go back on that because even though it's always interesting and it always kind of both teams go into the playoffs, whether it's the semifinal, the championship game, it's 0-0. Your record from the regular season doesn't matter. Your Big 12, Big 10, whatever championship, SEC, whatever you won doesn't matter. And all that matters is getting the big one. And so I think that all of these teams are going to go at it, and I want to see a Big Ten national championship game. That would be
Yeah.
historic. I think that would be one of the best ones we've seen in a while.
Yep.
But I don't know. I'm still thinking Georgia, since they've been the most consistent team, will hold on. But either way, I think it'll be a good game and a good couple of games, and I think that we will have a Big Ten champion on top. I don't think, even if Georgia is the team and my predictions right and they make it, I still think Michigan's going to take care of business. So either way, I think the Big Ten will be represented. But speaking of representation, it has officially gone through that the NCAA is expanding the playoff picture to 12 teams, I believe as soon as 2024. We've talked about this. I think we talked about this in season one because this has been something that it was 8, at one point I think they talked about, it was 8 and up. So I just think that they've kind of gone back and forth, but they've settled on 12. So since there's a couple of teams, obviously the Alabamas who are not used, I think this is only the second time they've missed the playoffs since has been the format. So definitely people expect them to be in there. But within those teams that would be in it from 1 to 12, we already talked about the top 4. Who do you have that may have made a push if the 12-team playoff was already in play? From the
That's
teams that
really
are 1 to 12.
that is really tough, man. Obviously Tennessee lost their starting quarterback. That might hamper them a little bit. But I'm just going to go over how it would set up. If we had a 12-team playoff starting this year, you would have number 8 Tennessee versus number 9 Kansas State. You would have a 5 seed TCU versus 12 seed Tulane. You would have Georgia, Utah, Clemson, and Michigan, as well as Alabama, USC, and then Ohio State, Penn State. If I were to go with a team that could make a serious push, I'm gonna have to go with the Kansas State Wildcats, man.
Great
Kansas
call,
State,
bro.
Kansas State looks really good on defense. They've got a really good running back in Deuce Vaughn. and their quarterback situation. Adrian Martinez was the starter a lot this year, but their backup has come in who was previously the starter, and he has that offense humming. Kansas State, as far as teams go, even though they're 10-3, is a very, very complete team. Um, and I honestly think they could make a serious run if the 12-team playoff was in place this year. Another team I could find interesting as well is Tulane. Tulane looked really good, especially in the American Athletic Championship. They looked good all year long. They could be a Cinderella story as well. What are your thoughts on the who you think could have made a serious push this year if things were in place?
Yeah, so I like what you're saying about the Cinderella story type of thing because we see that in March Madness. And I think one of the best parts, one of the reasons March Madness is so well viewed and well liked is because you see a lot of those Cinderella moments. I love watching, top tier teams go at it, but it does get a little old seeing the Alabamas. Me and you are both decently happy, not happy, but a little bit happy to see, a little different playoff field as college football fans. Seeing Alabama there every year, whether they win or lose, it
Yep.
gets a little bit old. So when you throw in, a team that really has to make a statement like Tulane that is not viewed as a top tier team, maybe we're going to see them have Cinderella runs. And I think that'll make the college football playoffs more exciting and maybe a little bit more even. When you throw more teams in there and there's more room for error or room for success, I think that's only going to grow the greatness of that. So I'm with you though for like a Cinderella team, Kansas State, I think they would have made a run. Am I going to say I think they would have been national champions? Not national champions, but I think they would have made a pretty darn close run. But a team that was just outside would be USC. I think
Yep.
USC, if they included 12 teams, I think USC would 100% make a run. And I'm calling it right now. I've got USC in the national championship. Do I have them winning the national championship? It all depends on those matchups. We have to look at all the different games and matchups that would, come with more teams. But I've got USC right in that national championship talk because that's a team that was right outside. Another team, Tennessee, Alabama. If there were 12, I mean, here's what we have to think about. If there are 12 teams going to the playoffs, this is not the last we have seen of Alabama in postseason. If there's 12 teams, I think Alabama is going to be a team that makes it every year consistently, even with those Saban years maybe coming to an end. Because if there's 12 teams, there is no way Alabama is not going to be up top, even in their worst years. This
Right.
is one of their most underperforming years. And what are they, fifth or sixth? They're still a top 12 team. So Alabama is going to be punishing us all with this 12-team lineup because I think me and you both talked last episode of the episode before that we think their success might dwindle a little bit, but I don't think it'll dwindle past them being a top 12 team. So Alabama would be right up there still, and we might be looking at them being crowned national champions if they had a chance to continue. So there's a couple of big names that I think would pull it off potentially, like Alabama, maybe Tennessee or USC. But I'm with you, man. Kansas State, I think they could have gone far, and we're going to start seeing that in the postseason, which excites me as a college football fan. More college
Yeah.
football. You won't hear me complaining too much about
Yeah.
that.
And Kansas State's playing Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, I believe. So that's going to be quite a matchup. Another team you can talk me into in this, potential making a run scenario. What about the Utah Utes? Um, the
They're right there.
Utah is right there as well. I mean, they beat USC twice this season in the regular season, and of course the Pac-12 championship. The regular season matchup was a all-time classic. Utah won 43-42, and then of course the Pac-12 championship was not all that close at all. Utah basically dominated from start to finish, but Utah's head coach really has Utah playing at a very high level, and they're going to be playing a good Penn State team come Rose Bowl. So that's going to be a good matchup as well. But yeah, when you're alluding to Alabama, Alabama is going to be in the scenario more often than not. Uh, do I think they could have made a run in a 12-team playoff this year? Yes. Was I going to put the bank on it? No. Alabama is just not that team this year. Maybe next year when they can get, that talent, developed and stuff like that, they could be, where we're used to seeing them, number one, number two in the country. But as we have all seen, like Alabama the last several years has kind of, while it hasn't shown, say, necessarily in record because they're still winning 10, 11, 12 games a year, they have shown digression over the last several years. I think that's in large part of maybe Nick Saban's getting older, and I think teams are starting to catch up. So we'll see. And then, of course, Tennessee, if they would have had their starting quarterback the remainder of the year, I think they probably would have been in the playoff with Georgia, Michigan, this year.
We don't want to say they'd be a shoo-in, but I think they'd be pretty darn close.
Yeah.
I think that that's a team that I think it was maybe episode 1 of season 2, right when we came back. Me and you were both on board because before, everything went down, they looked like a team that it was their time. They looked like a team that might come close to that Peyton Manning era of greatness. They really looked like a team that, we could really talk about in that level again. But I just don't think they had enough in them, especially with that quarterback going out. That's the life of your team, and especially a team where your image is held very highly in your quarterback. Even before this quarterback was even there, this is a quarterback school. Peyton Manning went there. How can it not be? So it really put them out, but they're a great team. And I think that, even without the 12 team lineup, I think we're going to see Tennessee in the coming years. But with that 12 team lineup, Tennessee is going to be in there every single year as well. They're another team that's going to be right there in the playoffs consistently.
Yep, I agree. Well, as we all know, the Heisman Trophy voting has occurred. Georgia's Stetson Bennett, or no, not Stetson Bennett. Caleb Williams from USC ended up winning it. Excuse me. And there are some people going around saying that he was potentially the worst winner in Heisman, voting history potentially, and I just don't see that. Caleb Williams had a really good year. Let me pull up his statistics real quick. Yeah, so he had 4,075 passing yards, 37 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, completed 66% of his passes. He was worthy of it, in my opinion, even though he did not have a great Pac-12 championship game. In my opinion, though, I don't think he should have won it over Max Duggan from TCU, especially after his performance in the championship game. He practically carried the Horned Frogs on his back to lead them back from 11 down, I think it was, in the fourth quarter, which is a really good comeback in, a very, very tough championship game. But yeah, I wouldn't go down to say that Caleb Williams was the worst one to win it, because obviously he had the stats to show for it. In my opinion, though, the performance in that championship game should matter. And in my opinion, Max Duggan had a better performance in his championship game compared to what Caleb Williams did against Utah.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. Max Duggan ended up second in official voting. They released that official, or as officials they can release the voting, and he was second. And I'm with you on he should have been first. But Caleb Williams is definitely not the worst in history. When I think about Heisman and the Heisman Trophy, I can't associate anything other than greatness. It doesn't matter if they were successful after that, whether they're successful in college after that or pros. It doesn't matter. That award you can't win without being great, at least statistically. And Caleb Williams had all of that. And now the Trojans are the winningest program for the Heisman, and they've earned that. That program just has produced Heisman winners in mass production. That is one of the most offensively electric schools in college football history. And Caleb Williams just added on. He had legendary top tier USC stats. And, did they make the playoffs? He made that comment in his, acceptance speech, how, yeah, he won, but they made the playoffs. I think that shows to me that he was the guy to win it, even though his team is not in the playoffs, because even though he's the Heisman, he wanted to win it all for his school. And that's a leader. How could it not be him? I mean, he definitely puts up that, look, and he puts up that, everything you need to be that leader, because the Heisman is also a leadership award. I don't think people understand that the Heisman is a leadership award, even when it's not been won by a quarterback. I think the Heisman is a leadership award above all else. So, he definitely was a leader to that team. But again, I'm with you on Dugan. He should have won that. Max Duggan was absolutely, Duggan was the guy. And at least he's in the playoffs. I was worried we might not even see Duggan in the playoffs, but I'm glad we're going to see him in the playoffs, because he's going to put up a show. And even if they fall, like I think me and you both think they will, it's going to be one hell of a game. So, congratulations to all those candidates. But when we look at the Heisman, within the last, it was going to be 10 years, but I realized that there's some really good candidates that are right below that. So let's make this even more difficult and say, who do we think is the best Heisman winner in the last 15 years? Who would you put up top, or at least who are your top two people to win the Heisman within the last 15 years? Who do you have up on that list for you, Mark?
All right. In my opinion, the best one in the last 10 years, I'm going to have to go with Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry had one of the best rushing seasons for Alabama back in 2015. He was very much worthy of winning that Heisman that year. He had 395 total carries, 2,219 yards, averaged over 5.5 yards a carry, had 28 touchdowns. And then adding on to that, he had 11 receptions for 91 yards, averaging about 8.3, yards a catch. And then his scrimmage numbers, 406 plays from scrimmage, 2,300 yards, almost 6 yards from scrimmage, and 28 touchdowns. He probably had one of the most, he had one of the greatest rushing performances that I have ever seen. And I'm not a Bama fan, but Derrick Henry has to go at the top as far as probably best over the last 10 years. And then I'm going to go with Lamar Jackson as well as in my top two, because Lamar Jackson, obviously, he's a freaking cheat code. And at Louisville he showed it. And then, of course, he's still continuing to show it in the NFL. He's hurt right now, but when he gets back, he's as elusive as ever. So Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson are my top two in the last 10 years. What about you?
So those are great picks. Yeah. And again, with top 10 last 10 or top two last 10 years, it's difficult because again, there's some legends right outside. There's legends all over the place. But if we're looking at the last 10 years, I've got to go with my boy Joe Burrow, who was the winner in 2019, the LSU senior. And this is why. LSU was super successful, won a championship, had the most success it's had, since the mid 2000s when it was one of those top tier teams. And then right when Joe Burrow left, dumpster fire. Not his fault, but not all his doing, but there were a lot of other players that left that didn't leave as big of a hole as Joe Burrow. So Joe Burrow had a statistically great season and he won a championship. And to me, that's legend. That's what it's all about at the end of the day. Again, Caleb Williams, great player statistically, but is not even going to get a chance to compete for a championship for his team. So I look at, players that have, yes, the statistic success, but also the success with winning. So I've got to put Joe Burrow up top. And then my number two spot, would be Baker Mayfield, 2017. We're going to talk more about Mayfield later. Unfortunately, we're going to talk more about Mayfield later. Kind of torched my boys, unfortunately. But, Baker Mayfield, one of the best to do it, one of the best college football players of all time, and really put Oklahoma football back on the map because, again, that's a historic football program. But before he was around and kind of, picked them up a little bit, they were really one of those suffering teams. They really reminded me a lot of the Huskers, maybe a little more success, but not what they were. And with Mayfield, they were, up in the playoffs and looked like a top tier team. So I've
Yep.
got to go with Baker Mayfield and Joe Burrow for my top two. But we could go on and on because there's so many legendary names. And like we both alluded to, you can't put the word bad with Heisman. So those
Nope.
are our, top two, but we could go on and on about that. But those are definitely the best of the best, I'd say, in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I agree. There have been a lot of great players, but I think we both picked some really good players that have won it the last 10 years. Um, the stats show it. I mean, when I alluded to Derrick Henry, he had one of the best rushing seasons I think that any of us have ever seen. And then as far as like, Joe Burrow put up some really gaudy numbers for that 2019 championship team for LSU. Um, but yeah, uh, that is, what, our Heisman thoughts and everything, um, as far as everything goes. So some big news dropped in Boulder, Colorado. Deion Sanders is going to be the next head coach there. I honestly don't know how it's going to go. Deion has shown that he's a pretty decent coach, but he is also a very, very arrogant guy. Um, and he's going into a different ball game now. He's going to be playing or coaching in a Power Five conference with the likes of Utah, USC, and Oregon. And Colorado went 1-11 this past season. So he's going into a very, very difficult situation. I can see it going a couple of different ways. I could see him getting Colorado at least competitive. I don't think he's going to get them to the point to where they're going to win a national championship. But something interesting, when Deion went to talk to the current Colorado players, a couple of quotes I would like to talk about. So he basically said to all the players in the room is basically pack your bags. I'm bringing my own luggage, which I kind of get because that is the team that went 1-11, and he knows that he can get some really good players into Boulder, based on his likeness alone. But I also think he could have gone at it a different way. Like, I get being direct. What are your thoughts on kind of his quote, and like what are your thoughts on his arrogance, and do you think his arrogance is going to get the best of him in Boulder?
Yeah, so first of all, I mean, shout out to him because I don't think anyone really took, Deion Sanders serious at first when he, took over at Jackson State, not because of where he was taking over. I mean, arguably probably a little bit of that. Not that I'm going to say that I thought that, but I feel like there are some people that didn't take it serious just because it wasn't, a top tier Division 1 program, but he went and he changed the culture and he changed the viewpoint, and he changed a lot for where he was at. Jackson State, he put on the map. He poured a lot of his own money into that team, and he made them one of the most electric teams on the college football team this season, not just for their league, but overall. Now, would they be able to stand up and beat an Alabama? He probably thinks so, but no, realistically, no. But still, he made that team great, and he made that entire league and division so much more mainstream than it was. So shout out to him for that. I think he absolutely deserves this this job. There's also something coming out that there may have been some money stolen and some things going on that played into him wanting to leave as well. That's not just him getting this opportunity, something about the university mishandling some money that he had donated. I don't know much about that, but there's some stuff breaking and some rumors going around there. So there might be more to this than what we know.
Yep.
But Boulder and Colorado is a whole different thing than Jackson State. And it's a whole different environment. And their first game of the season is against TCU. And here's what I'm going to tell you right now. Saturday, September 2nd, they play TCU. And here's my thing with that. TCU's in the college football playoffs right now.
Yep.
Do either of us think they're going to win the championship? No. But could they surprise both of us and make the championship game? Potentially. Or are they at least looked at as a force to be reckoned with if they are in the playoffs? Absolutely. And you're going up against them week 1. And then right after them, guess who you're going up against? Guess who your second game is? It's Nebraska.
Yes,
and
sir.
I don't care how Nebraska looks or how we feel. We want to beat Colorado every time we play them, and we're going to give them a game. And I think Nebraska's going to be in a way better position. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But so you have TCU and then Nebraska back to back to start your Colorado career. Am I going to sit here and say that I think he's going to go 0-2 in those games? No, I don't think so. I think he could easily go 1-1. I hope that win is not against our boys, but you never know. But either way, I think he is going to be a great coach. I think he's going to turn them around. I think that he is going to bring some top players in. People forget that he got the top recruit last season to go to Jackson State instead of Florida, originally committed to Florida State. And then it may have been the top defensive recruit, but either way, one of the best came to Jackson State and is already mentioned following Deion. His son, who is a great quarterback, is at least going to come and get, a play, opportunity and an opportunity to play for that spot. So I think Deion's going to make this team better. I think he's going to make them great. Looking at their schedule, TCU, Nebraska, Colorado State, Arizona, Oregon State, Stanford, USC, Oregon, UCLA, Utah, and Washington State. I get that he's confident and I get that he thinks that he's the guy. And I think he's a great coach, but you can't come in too cocky and too confident because that is a tough schedule. And a lot of those teams are ranked currently. And so even if he gets his Louis luggage, like he said, I don't think he's going to have, a playoff success type of season. First of all, the playoff field isn't even going to be set for 12 teams yet, but I don't even think he's going to be a top 12 ranked team. But this is what I will say about Deion Sanders. He's a great coach. He brings great players. I think he's going to bring a lot of his best players from Jackson State, which are a lot of the top recruits for when they came, regardless of what season it was. So I think he is going to bring great players to a pretty good historic area. And I think he's going to at least win himself six to 8 games. I don't think he's going to go below 6. I don't think he's going to go below 8, but I do think he's going to have success. And I think he will turn Colorado back into a winning program. I just don't think it's going to be right away. He had major success right away at Jackson State, but that's a way different league. And even if he brings in the top guys, it takes time for a coach to get set no matter how great they are. So I have him winning 6 to 8 games, but I definitely don't have him going below 6. Do I see him maybe going above 8? Maybe, but I'm sitting Colorado at 6 to 8 wins next season, and then only advancing on that further because he is a great coach, but he's not ready to win every game or be a contender right away because no coach is, no matter how great you are.
I agree. But I'm gonna go back on his arrogance and stuff like that. We all saw Scott Frost as he rolled in here. Extremely arrogant, extremely cocky, saying that, he hopes the Big Ten has to adjust to him. Well, we all know how that turned out. I honestly think, I agree. He should not go in too arrogant. He has shown that he's been a pretty good coach, but it's in a completely different spot than where he's at now. It's kind of like Scott Frost at UCF coming to Lincoln. Completely different spot. The American Athletic Conference is way different than the Big Ten. So time will tell. as far as, how good Deion is going to be. But yeah, I think 6 to 8 wins is right around where I see him. But I honestly think it could be worse than that because in a way, I think he could be a little over his head. Kind of like what Frost was. Because again, it's a different ball game. The question is, can he adjust to the different ball game that he's going to see from all those Pac-12 teams? That question remains to be seen, and he's got a really tough schedule to start with. You just alluded to it. He starts off the season with TCU, and then guess who rolls into town? Nebraska rolls into town, and nobody knows how Nebraska is going to look. And we'll touch on Nebraska and the coaching staff and what they're going to do here shortly. But you got two pretty tough teams right off of the bat. We all know Matt Rule is going to have the boys ready to play in Boulder, come that weekend. So, yeah, I don't think he should be too arrogant. But as we have all seen, Deion Sanders is just an all-around cocky guy, and I honestly think it could come back to bite him.
And I think you're right. And I think that this is the stage where it will. It never came back to bite him so much as a player. Now, did he ever have his moments where he got absolutely stuffed or a little bit clowned on like all players do? Of course, every legend has that. But he never really got shown up as a player. He was always Deion Sanders. He was always great.
Yeah.
Here's what I want to say. I do like that comparison to Scott Frost because I was sitting there at first and I was like, well, Scott Frost, accomplished more as a player. Well, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter at all. Yeah, Deion saying like Scott Frost didn't accomplish as much as a player, but you could look at them and say they've accomplished similar as a coach.
Yep.
Yes, Deion Sanders has that championship as a coach, but again, it's a different league or a different division. And at least, Frost was up there and arguably should have been looked at more. Would they have been able to contend for an actual national championship? No, but that's your point. It's a whole
Yep.
different thing. And I think
Yep.
that that's a great comparison. And I think that I will say I do give Sanders a little bit of an edge above Coach Frost in their beginning with their program because I do think that Sanders does understand the stakes, and I also think he understands what it's going to take. So I think they're going to be 6 to 8 wins. I don't see them falling below that. I don't see them going above that. And I see him being, a pretty decent head coach, but it's going to take time because it always takes time. And we might not see, us sitting here talking about Sanders being a championship contending coach because it's only getting more competitive. I believe Deion Sanders can get it done long term, but I just don't know. We don't know until we know, and that's the thing with Coach Frost that happened. You can't make an assumption before you see what actually happens for those guys. So, hope for the best. Unfortunately, it's the Colorado Buffaloes, but I'm a decent Deion fan, as a player and just as a coach. So I'm hoping that he at least has some success. But time will tell. I hope that we at least get that win when we play them. That's the only one that I hope that they lose for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Hopefully Nebraska can go into Boulder and show Coach Sanders what's up. Hopefully Matt Rule has got the boys rolling early. I think it's gonna be difficult for Matt Rule in year one. I do think he's gonna have a pretty tough, different looking team out there than what we've seen under Frost the last 5. So it's gonna be an interesting matchup. Going to the Huskers now. The coaching staff is finalized for Nebraska. Um, Obviously Matt Rule's head coach. Offensive coordinator Marcus Satterfield out of South Carolina. I kind of want to touch on the offensive coordinator just a little bit. So Marcus Satterfield runs a RPO type offense. At South Carolina, it was run heavy, but he has history of potentially going to a run heavy RPO, which in the Big Ten, you need to establish the trenches. You need to be able to run the ball and be able to throw the ball off of that. I think that offense can be very successful here in the Big Ten. Because you're going to constantly keep the other teams guessing. You're going to get into sets where defenses are going to be trying to figure out what's going on. I think down the road that offense is going to be pretty successful. It all depends on quarterback play. Who's going to be coming in to play quarterback? People are, speculating on if Casey Thompson's going to be coming back. If Casey Thompson comes back and he's healthy, I think he can really thrive in this offensive system. They're also talking about the guy out of Georgia Tech, that 4-star dual threat quarterback. He took an official visit, I think, this past weekend. So there are options out there. If it's not Casey Thompson or Chuba, there are options, out there in the transfer portal they can pick up. Another pickup on the staff I really like is Tony White. He was the defensive coordinator at Syracuse and brought them to top 30 defenses in the last couple of seasons. On average, giving up, 20 points or less a game, which in the Big Ten is going to be huge. The less you give up, obviously, you're going to put yourself in a pretty good spot to win some ball games in the Big Ten. Ed Foley is the special teams coordinator. EJ Barthel, running backs coach. A lot of these guys are coming over from the Carolina Panthers. And I think, with their experience in the NFL, and some of them even have college experience with Matt Rule, I think they can be, they can thrive pretty well here. Evan Cooper, secondary coach. Obviously, he was over in Carolina. Terrence Knighton. He's one of the guys I'm really excited about because, as we all know, Terrence Knighton had a really good career in the NFL. He's also had a good career as a coach, coaching the defensive line. It's his 5th season coaching in 2023. He had an outstanding NFL career. He accumulated 231 tackles from 2009 to 2015, which ranked him in the top 15 of all defensive tackles in the NFL during that time frame. He was a really good player, so he knows how to coach the defensive line to do all the right things, which is going to be huge because we haven't had a defensive line at Nebraska to really win over the trenches. In fact, more often than not, the last 5 years, they were getting pushed around. They really, really good hire. And then Donovan Raiola. There's a lot of people out there that are not excited about that rehiring of Donovan Raiola, but he only had 1 year. He had 1 year with the guys that he was provided, didn't really get a chance to recruit anybody on the O-line. So I give props to Matt Rule for giving him a shot. I think he deserves a shot. And then Corey Campbell. Corey Campbell's a really good head, strength and conditioning coach. He was at Baylor with Matt Rule. And we all saw the reshaping of that Baylor team toward the end of his career. They looked like a totally different team than they were, a couple of years prior when Matt Rule of it, took over. I'm really excited with the staff. There's a couple of people, that I'm questioning. Ed Foley being special teams coordinator is one of them. How good the special teams is going to be remains to be seen. But as a whole, I think it's a pretty good staff to start things out. What are your thoughts on this staff?
So, yeah, I mean, like you said, Matt Rule is bringing a lot of people that have been in his circle and he's coached with, not just in the NFL, but from before then. Like you've alluded to, he's retaining the right people and he's bringing in the new people that I think will add to the experience and add to the success. And I think we're looking at a Husker team that is more well-rounded coaching wise. I think that we have talked, I know last season and this season about how there's been no lack of talent. Well, when there's no lack of talent on a team, then you have to look at the next part, which is the coaching. If you have all the talent in the world, there has to be a reason it's not working. And you have to look at the coaching next because that's who it falls back on next. So The coaching needs to always be evaluated. And I think that it took the Huskers too long to evaluate that. I do think it was at an unfortunate point in the season to evaluate it, but I think it needed to be done. And I think that Rule has shown that he knows who needs to stay and who needs to be new. And I think that I'm excited. This staff looks solid start to finish. The best thing the thing I like most is the fact that Matt Rule is bringing, coaches in that he has coached with and has that relationship with, because no matter what they've accomplished record wise, championship wise, they have that back and forth. They have that relationship. They have that bond that makes it so much easier to put up big performances and to grow. So
Yep.
I think it's going to be big. I think it's going to be super exciting. And again, a lot of these players have been with Matt Rule, not just with the Panthers, but also when he was coaching at Temple. There's a lot of relationships that have been built up over the years. And I think that will only help us, because I think coaching and the relationships the coaches have, even just with themselves, is a bigger aspect to success than people think. And I
Yep.
think Will build his staff thinking about that and taking that into consideration. So I think this is a solid staff, and I think this is the best coaching staff the Huskers have had for the last, I would say, 10 plus years. I'm gonna be honest. I think this is the best coaching staff and the most well-rounded staff they've had in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I agree. I think this staff, top to bottom, I give it a solid B plus. Whether that translates to wins or not remains to be seen, but I honestly think we're gonna see quite a different Husker football team than we have seen. Matt Rule is proven to be a really good developer. He sent a lot of people to the NFL. Obviously, he has NFL coaching experience, but his college experience alone, developing these players, rebuilding these programs up from basically the bottom, his reputation, you know, his reputation is everything. And he has a really good one at that. And bringing in all these guys that he has all the, coaching relationships with is huge. I think it could pay off very well. Kind of looking at, the Husker schedule for next season a little bit. They start the season off at Minnesota on Thursday, August 31st. So they open up Thursday night, most likely. Then they play at Colorado. And then they play Northern Illinois, Louisiana Tech, Michigan. And then they play at Illinois. That's their first six. What are your thoughts on the first six games? And what do you think their record is going to be after those six?
So yeah, we look at those first six. I think that this Nebraska team is going to be, I'm gonna say leaps and bounds, and I'm gonna stick to that. I think they're gonna be leaps and bounds better than that Minnesota team. And I think they're gonna take Minnesota down to be 1-0. I do think that we're gonna be the team that drops to Deion in Colorado, and I think that's gonna put us at 1-1, but bounce back Northern Illinois 2-1, and then Louisiana Tech. Absolutely, we should win that game, which would put us at 2-1. And then looking at
Great.
Michigan, I have us dropping that game because I do think that will be the national champion, the reigning national champs. So that's 2-2. I think we'll take Illinois down. I think we'll take them down and be 3-2. And then I think we'll take Northwestern down to be 4-2. So I think within those first six games, we'll start 4-2.
Yeah, I agree. But my prediction is slightly different. I think we beat Minnesota. I think we go into Boulder and we beat Colorado for the first time in over a decade. I think we beat Northern Illinois and I think we beat La Tech. So that puts us at 4-0. We lose to Michigan. I think we beat Illinois and I think we beat Northwestern. So Michigan is my only sure loss in that first, 6-game stretch. I think they can take care of business at Colorado because, as we all know, Colorado is in a transition year. It's going to take a while for Deion to get things established there the way he wants it to. And then Northern Illinois, La Tech are games that we should win. And honestly, Minnesota too. I honestly think the defense is going to be way better. I think the RPO offense that Satterfield is going to bring in, I think it's going to give Minnesota some fits. And I still think, Nebraska has got some pretty good ball players that just need good development and leadership. So I think, Minnesota, I think opening it up with a win, opening the season up with a win against Minnesota, who has gotten the better part of you the last few years. I think it's going to be huge going into that September 9th matchup against Colorado because it's building, good momentum. Something that this team hasn't felt in 5+ seasons. So there's that. I'm just gonna rain down the entire schedule, how I maybe think it'll play out. Um, Minnesota, I've got as a win. Colorado, I've got as a win. Northern Illinois, La Tech, both wins. Michigan, loss. At Illinois, which is going to be tough. If Brett Bielema has Illinois rolling, I think they could give Nebraska some fits. But I got Nebraska beating Illinois in Champaign. I've got Nebraska beating Northwestern because Northwestern is so down right now. They're probably in a worse spot than Nebraska is at this point. They play Purdue, and Purdue is going through a coaching change as well, which I think proves very well. I think that's another win. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7-1 after Purdue. At Michigan State, nobody knows how good Michigan State's going to be. But I'm going to pit that as a loss. So that'll put them at 7-2. Maryland is kind of a tough team too. Maryland is pretty up right now. They just finished 7-5, but they had one of the more prolific offenses in the Big Ten. I don't know if Tagovailoa is going to be back as quarterback for Maryland. I'm going to put that as a win too. And then Wisconsin, I have as a loss. And then Iowa, I have as a win at home. So maybe 9-3 at best, but I'm hoping for 6-6. Get them to a bowl game, and then we'll talk the remainder of the season as we go on. Once we get to 6, everything else is in play. And that's what I said about this last year. This last season, I'm like, okay, Scott Frost just needs to get these guys to 6 because it was a very winnable West Division. And I don't really see anything different next year. I think it's going to be anybody's ball game next year as well. It's going to be crazy to where there's going to be 4 different scenarios in the final weekend for somebody to win the West. And it's the final year of the West Division, so I don't expect anything less. So we'll see, but I think anywhere between 6-6 and 9-3 is very much in the cards.
And I'm with you. And what I like about that is it's a very wide range because I don't think we really know just how great this Husker team can turn around. I just think we know they're going to turn around. And I think I would bet money on them making a bowl game. I just think if they miss a bowl game, it's time to maybe just take the football program away because they have a complete change. And again, all jokes aside, just seeing them improve their record by a win or two would be nice because at least us competing and pulling a lot of those closer games off or holding on to those games in the first half and contributing in the second and maybe pulling some wins off. I think we'll see that. So that contributes and turns into wins. So I think that we're going to see a team, like you said, is going to be in between, 6-6, 9-3, and they'll be, a bowl team and maybe a team that is top of the Big Ten. I think their ceiling is being the top of the Big Ten and maybe competing for that Big Ten championship. And I think their floor is being, that 6-6 competing for a bowl game. But either way, that's more success than we've seen for years. And so I'm sure we'll both take that.
Yeah, I agree. But I was listening to some afternoon sports talk shows, some of the local ones here in Omaha, and they're talking about like with Matt Rule, his ceiling is way higher here than it was at Temple, than it was at Baylor. And all that being in part of, the new facility that's going to be opening up this next year, which is going to bring a lot of really good talent in. So, he has everything going for him. And I honestly think we're going to see a very different looking Nebraska team especially, on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. The defensive scheme is kind of interesting. It is a 3-3-5 defense. You got three down linemen. You've got, three backers, three of your main backers and edge rushers. And then you've got five, DBs with your nickel backers and stuff. And their defense is going to be playing fast. This defense is classified as a chaotic defense because they create chaos all over the field. And we saw that at Syracuse. This defense, it does work. I mean, they competed down to the wire against Clemson, which Clemson was down this year, but I don't care. Clemson still has some of the most talent in the country. So it has worked. And I have a feeling we're going to see a more aggressive team in terms of, rushing the passer and stopping the run. And I honestly think the defensive backfield is going to be better. So I would really, I would bet some money on Nebraska at least making a bowl game. But like I alluded to, get to 6 wins, take it one game at a time, go 1-0 each week, and the rest of it will take care of itself.
And I think that's the only way we can look at that, because the last close to 10 years have been every week, it's another, saga, another storyline, another problem on off the field. And as Husker fans, I know we're ready to see the flip side of this. And I think we're here. I think we'll see that. Again, I'm not going to shoot the gun and say we're going to be closer to that 9-3 mark, but I think we're going to sit very comfortably around that 6-6 mark. I
Yeah.
definitely see us winning more than 6 games, but I think that 6 is absolutely where we can get to, at the least. So I think it's going to be a new dawn, a new era in Nebraska. And I think that it really is going to be that now. A lot of people thought that with Frost, but I'm going to be honest. My first YouTube video I ever made was why I can't stand the Huskers or something like that. And it was right after they hired Scott Frost. So right when I started doing anything like this, I was dogging on Scott Frost. So it just feels right to do it at least one more time. But in all honesty, I feel very much relieved, and I feel like we really will see the success that we deserve. So I don't think it's going to be some crazy national championship run, but I think by the time they add 12 teams, we will be on our way to being a playoff team pretty consistently. I don't want to say that quite yet, but I think since they're adding it in 24, I think by the time we get to like 25, 26, we'll be in that playoff conversation. I think that we could be a team that jumps higher than people think. People count us out completely now. There's been some ridiculous buzz the last few years, early season putting us way too high, but now no one thinks anything of Nebraska. The rule hire gets us a little bit up there, but I think we're going to shock some people and show up and be a top 25 team next season, potentially. I think we have the talent on both the player side and coaching side. Now we just need to see if we can pull off some of those wins, because do we have a super difficult schedule? No, but any team in the Big Ten could beat you on any given day. And
Absolutely.
we have a pretty stacked Big Ten lineup. So I think it could be a great season. And I think we could be sitting here this time next season, maybe talking about Nebraska at least being in a bowl game. But it's just exciting to see a new dawn and some new buzz in Nebraska, because it's been much needed.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It should have been done long ago. But I think Matt Rule is the right guy to get it right. We all said that about Frost, but I also had my um thoughts against the Frost hiring as well, especially after his opening press conference. I'm like, dude, your arrogance is going to get the best of him. And sure enough, his arrogance got the best of him. So, yeah, all in all, we will definitely continue to talk more on Husker football. Um, as far as recruiting and stuff goes, and believe it or not, we're just a few months away from spring football. So we'll definitely have more going on there. But let's transition over to Husker hoops. Nebraska basketball is kind of a different looking team this year. They are very good on the defensive side of the ball, which is definitely a change of focus that Dan Hoiberg has had over the last few years, because he wanted to put more of the emphasis on offense. That has since changed. which we all saw that in Nebraska's win over number 7 Creighton a few games ago, 63-53. Derek Walker scored 22 points. Defense looked really good. Creighton could not shoot the ball for the life of themselves, and they just put themselves in a really difficult spot. Creighton only shot 30.8% from the field, which is crazy. They only shot 25% from three, had 15 turnovers. Nebraska out rebounded Creighton 42-37. Nebraska, they're kind of an interesting case. They just lost a close one to Purdue, 65-63 in overtime. But again, another really good defensive performance. What are your thoughts on this Husker Hoops team? And do you think they have what it takes to maybe knock off a couple of these teams in the Big Ten to maybe get themselves in a pretty interesting spot?
So I think that this team has proven to us very early on, because usually to me, the problem with Husker hoops, the women's basketball has been on the uprising the last few seasons for the Huskers, and they've been looking great, and they've not stopped that. But the men's basketball program has been very up and down. And Hoiberg was brought in to kind of reshape the program, and he just hasn't really done that yet. There's been a lot of people who have been, very skeptical about how that's all going to play out, but I think that this is his season to show us who he is, or it's time to move on. And I think so far we've seen a change. I think we've seen more urgency. We've seen this team play together more. I think this is the most complete unit we've seen under Hoiberg. And maybe part of that's recruiting. Maybe part of that is him finally getting his system down and getting those recruits in line, and some of those players returning, maybe offering more than they did last season. So that Creighton win was a huge one. And then going up against, number 4 Purdue and only losing by 3 points. That is a team that we have not seen for Nebraska hoops for the last few seasons. My only concern, can they beat Kansas State? Of course they can. They can beat a lot of these teams. They can beat an Iowa. They can beat a Michigan State. The problem is they can't compete against these top tier teams. They compete against them, such as Purdue, but I don't think they can overcome them, and that's been a very common theme in their misery. So when we talk about them playing the top teams like Illinois, who's 17, or when they play Purdue again, there's a lot of Big Ten teams. Big Ten basketball is very competitive, and it's always anyone's game. But beating Creighton is huge, because we've not had even that level of just like statewide success for a while. And Creighton is a team that everyone has going pretty far. So the fact that we could pull that off and win that is huge. And I think that Nebraska hoops is finally going to compete, because we saw that in that Purdue loss. Do I have them being a team that is on top of the Big Ten? No, I do not. But I have them being a team that finishes way better record-wise than they did last season, and way better moral-wise. I think this is a team that's going to morally be stronger and be a stronger unit going forward. And I think we'll see them in March within the next few seasons. I don't think we'll see them there quite yet, but their days of March are coming, and they're showing that with that win over Creighton. So the dawn is definitely coming for this team, but I think it's going to take a little more time. And I'm still not super convinced Hoiberg is the guy, long term, but he's who we have right now, and we're starting to string together some wins. So a lot more positivity there.
Yeah, I agree. Hoiberg has definitely got these guys playing a way tougher brand of basketball, which they've needed to the last several years, right? So he has finally adjusted the mold of what the team should be, because we see some really good defensive teams here in the Big Ten. And what is the saying that goes around everywhere? Defense wins championships. So eventually we will see that Nebraska team make that next step. But I do think Nebraska could finish at 500, or they can even finish a little better than 500 and maybe even get themselves an NIT bid. Will they make March? Probably not. But if they can finish 500, maybe a little bit better, and get into the NIT or get into the postseason in any facet, whether it be knocking off a few top 25 teams and maybe even becoming a bubble team here this season, like that would be a huge step in the right direction. I do think Hoiberg will get it done. He hasn't gotten it done the last few seasons, but he does have this team playing at a very, very different level than what we have seen. And we saw that against number 7 Creighton, and then again in a loss against number 4 Purdue. Um, so hopefully they can rebuild some of the, consistency that they need for the Big Ten play, because they've got a long Big Ten season ahead of them. Again, we'll have more on Husker hoops, what we think of them as the season goes on. Let's touch on the NHL a little bit. The NHL season is well underway. My boys are playing very, very well right now. They've won 5 straight. They sit in 3rd in the Metropolitan Division. Um, Other teams that look pretty good, the Boston Bruins. Boston Bruins have looked really good. Maple Leafs. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this NHL season so far? It looks pretty competitive so far.
Yeah, so as you were alluding to, there's a lot of competitiveness so far. NHL is kind of a fun season because it's a longer season, but it's such exciting matches and there's so much excitement throughout that it almost doesn't feel like as long of a season as it is. But I think that it's going to be a great season so far. A team to me, now, of course, it's early on, they're very competitive, but a team to me that, in my opinion, has been underperforming for who they were last season is the Avalanche. I'm not going to sit here and say that they're underperforming or they're a bottom tier team because they're still within that top 3 in the Central Division. But to me, they're a team that looked like they had so much success, but a lot of these other teams are already showing that they're ready to be next. And I'm going to throw out a team right now that I think specifically thinks that they might be up next. I know we're really early on still, but a team that looks like they might be ready for that cup is the Devils. I think they're looking like a team that, I'm not going to say no one saw that coming, but I'm going to say that they're looking like a team that could really make a push and hold that success throughout the season. I know that they're sitting above your boys, but what are your thoughts on the Devils so far?
The Devils have really come out on fire. They have a plus 37 in goal differential, which is, I believe, tops in the NHL. No, they're second behind the Boston Bruins, but the Devils have played a really high level of hockey. They sit at 21-5-1, have 43 points so far. They look really good. They're really good on the road. They're 11-1 on the road. They're 10-4 at home, so they're still really good at home. But the fact that they can win on the road in a pretty consistent clip is pretty big, especially in the NHL. Um, they're playing a good brand of hockey, man. There's nothing, nothing else to really say. I mean, their record kind of speaks for themselves. I honestly didn't think they would come up, this high a level, especially after the last couple of seasons where they've kind of finished down in the standings a little bit. But I mean, they've drafted really well, and it's finally starting to show for them. So hats off to the Devils so far this season. We'll see if they can keep it up. But yeah, another team I'm kind of shocked that, kind of underperforming a little bit is the Washington Capitals. The Capitals have, they still have a lot of their core talent that they've had the last few years. And the, talent that won the cup back in 2018, I believe. So the fact that now they're sitting in the bottom 3 in the Metro, basically just sitting above water, um, is kind of shocking to me. Because they still have Alex Ovechkin, they've got TJ Oshie, but their goaltending has kind of been hit or miss. They've won 4 straight games, so they were 10-12, so they're starting to pick up a little steam a little bit. Um, but yeah, the Capitals and then the Colorado Avalanche, while they're still in the top 3 in their Central Division, they've kind of underperformed to me because last year they had probably the highest scoring line in all of the NHL, and they wound up winning the cup last season. They don't look like the same team that they were last year, at least so far. There's still a lot of season left for them to maybe catch a little bit of their stride from last year. But so far this year, they really haven't, shown that same level. They've only scored 82 goals this season, which is kind of mid pack, if not towards the bottom a little bit. So again, we'll see. A team that I'm not shocked with that's as bad as they are is the Philadelphia Flyers, and I am not bummed to say that at all because I am a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, and seeing a rival down at the bottom of the standings is the most beautiful thing in the world. Sorry to all the Flyer fans that listen in, but it's true. The Flyers haven't done a whole lot. They have one of the worst goal differentials in the NHL right now. They're sitting at minus 26. They have only scored 70 goals on offense, which is god awful so far this season. They've given up 96. So they're putting themselves in a very difficult spot as well. But let's touch on my Penguins just a little bit. My Penguins have won 5 straight. They're 8-1-1 in their last 10 games. So they are scorching hot right now. Plus 17 goal differential. And they're scoring a lot of goals in these wins. Let's pull up their schedule real quick. So in their, last say 5 games, they've scored 4 against Vegas, 6 against St. Louis, 4 against Columbus, 4 against Buffalo, and then 3 against Buffalo. So they're averaging darn near 5 goals a game in each of those 4 games. And having a good offense, showing up by good goaltending, which goaltending is a big thing in the NHL, obviously. If you can't really stop, anybody from scoring, chances of you winning are very, very slim. But yeah, they're playing a good level of hockey right now. The question is, can they keep it up? Tristan Jarry for the Penguins right now has 12 wins, 3 losses, 3 overtime losses, while giving up 2.7 goals a game. He's played very well. Casey DeSmith playing a little bit down from him, hence why Jari is the starter. But even still, he's giving up 2.8 goals a game. So they're playing a good level of hockey, something that I haven't seen in a while. And I think that could pay dividends to them as well.
Absolutely.
So yeah, there's a lot of, good races so far in the NHL.
The action's heating up for sure. It's definitely getting past that. I know we still kind of talked and both alluded to the point that it's still sort of early on, but we're kind of getting past that first little chunk of the season block and moving on to like the more, exciting race. And one team I want to talk about is Dallas. I think
Yes.
Dallas, before we move on from hockey, I think we can't not talk about Dallas and shed a little more light on Dallas, because Dallas is a very historic sports city. And I think that the hockey team, they're second currently in that central division. And, it's a tight race, and they very well could end up first within the month. I think that this Dallas team, I think this is their season. I think they're showing us that this could be their year, and they've been one of those top competitive teams. So I think Dallas is coming for it. I think Dallas, we've got the Dallas Cowboys to both of our chagrin. I'm never will be a Cowboys fan. You can never pay me enough to be a Cowboys fan. They've had success with the Cowboys. They've had, pretty good success with the Mavs, and they've had a decent amount of success overall with sports and just that, revenue. But now I think hockey is on the rise in Dallas, and I think this team is going to go places. So Dallas is a team to watch, and we'll definitely come back and look at throughout the season, and there'll be more action as the season goes on. But
Yep.
hockey's heating up, man, and we're going to have plenty more to talk about later in the season for sure.
Absolutely, and I am so excited for it. Hockey is one of my favorite games to watch. I was just at a couple of hockey games, not this weekend, but the weekend before. Got to go watch UNO play Friday night and Saturday night against number 14 Western Michigan, and it was a weekend sweep for the Mavs, which was good to see. So, um, the Omaha Mavericks are starting to heat up in college, so that's kind of fun to see. But yeah, again, we will continue to talk on the NHL as the season goes on. Let's transition over to a little bit of NFL. One of the big moves that happened was Baker Mayfield got traded over to the Rams. And in his first game with the Rams, he led a double-digit comeback against, was it the Raiders? I believe it was the Raiders.
Fortunately, it was the Raiders. You are correct.
It was the Raiders. And he looked really good in that comeback. As far as what this means for the league and the Rams, I think Baker to the Rams is going to make them a little bit more of a complete team. Will they make the playoffs? It is highly unlikely. But will he help the Rams get a few wins under their belt? Abso-freaking-lutely, because they need a quarterback. And with Matt Stafford out, and I think their other backup is out with an injury as well, they need somebody with some NFL experience to come in and lead that offense. I honestly think it was a really good move for the Rams to make, and I think it could be a potential long haul move for the Rams. Whether it be, if Matt Stafford comes back and he's the starter and having Baker as a suitable backup, I think it could prove huge because as we all know, if a quarterback gets hurt, you need the next best guy to step up. And not all these teams have a next best guy outside of maybe Brock Purdy with the San Francisco 49ers. Brock Purdy is pretty phenomenal right now, and it's kind of crazy. But yeah, I think Baker to the Rams is a big, and I think it's a really good move for him. What are your thoughts?
So, unfortunately, I'm wearing the Raiders hat right now. I got to wear it backwards. I can't show too much support. I'm a little embarrassed about my boys because we were easily picked to win this game. I think that to me, this was a game that could have continued. And we'll talk about the Raiders in a little bit, in a little more detail. But this could have been a game that could have extended our potential playoff hopes. But now that we dropped this game, I mean, essentially, we had to be close to perfect in the rest of our games, and losing to the Rams, with focus wise and confidence wise and also record wise, it's really awful. And the way we lost was Baker. Had we not had Baker, even if Stafford was healthy, we would have won that game. Stafford cannot come back and make pushes like that. Stafford is a great quarterback, championship quarterback, finally got his ring, finally got the success he deserves, but he is not him. But Baker Mayfield is that guy. We saw it, like I said, he was one of the people I put in my top 10 Heisman. He's that guy. He's ready for those moments. He's built for those moments. And Baker Mayfield is great. He went from a very unfortunate Cleveland situation to an even more unfortunate, Carolina situation, but he's still a great quarterback, and he showed that. It only took him 2 days to adapt, and not only to adapt, but to win. So is it big for the league? Not really. I don't think Baker is not going to be a starter for the Rams unless something ends up with Stafford and there's some sort of trade or maybe he retires. I wouldn't be shocked if Stafford maybe retires after this season, depending on how he heals up. Can't say anything for sure, but I wouldn't be shocked if we maybe see a retirement. And then Mayfield, I think, is very primed to take that job. But as long as Stafford is in LA, it's not going to be his job. But I think Mayfield could be a really solid backup quarterback. And I think he will find his way back to a starting roster spot eventually. I think he's a great quarterback. I think he has a great eye for the field. And I think he has a great confidence that a quarterback needs to lead. So good for Mayfield. Unfortunately, he beat my boys. But I definitely think this is big for the Rams going forward, even if he isn't your guy, because if Mayfield is your backup, you're dangerous. If you have someone starting for Mayfield and Mayfield is your backup, you've got a pretty deep QB room. So
Yep.
honestly, I would say that this is huge for the Rams as a team going forward. I think they've maybe solved one of their roster holes. I don't think that Mayfield will take over that starting spot unless something happens with Stafford and he retires, or some sort of something happens, some movement happens and they end up moving him. But as of now, I think Mayfield is definitely still viewed as the backup to Stafford, but it was big. And I think it was big because I think people forgot who Baker Mayfield was. And I think that was a big statement game. So again, super upset they beat my boys, but good for Baker Mayfield. That was a statement win and that was an all-time performance. But speaking of the Raiders, we can't avoid it any longer. We have to address the elephant in the room. And that would be the Raiders. They're now the Vegas Raiders. They've been the LA Raiders. They've been the Oakland Raiders. Well, they're in Vegas now. And I would say a roulette game board is pretty similar to what the Raiders team has been this year. It's been a real roulette. You're either going to get shot in the head and you're out, or you somehow pull off a victory and you defeat the odds and it's all luck and this and that. It's been both ways for this Raiders team. But the
Yep.
question I want to ask you is this team poorly constructed, or should we be looking at the coach? Should we be looking at the coach in this situation, or should we be looking at the team? What are your thoughts on the Raiders and their woes? Because you have legends, you have players that are great. You have one of the leading rushers, one of the leading receivers. How can you be losing some of the best defense? What are your thoughts? Should we be looking more at the coach, the team, or management, or all of the above?
I honestly think it all lies on the coach and the management because you alluded to it. They have good players on both sides of the ball. They're not getting coached up right, or the coaches and the management are putting them in very difficult situations. It all starts from the top, and I think I alluded to it the first episode that we came back. Is the management isn't anywhere near where it needs to be for that Raiders team to be good. The coaching staff is not anywhere near where it needs to be for this team to be good. So I honestly think, like, are the players a part of it? Absolutely. But you can't put all the blame on the players when the coaches are putting them in very, very difficult spots to succeed. Because if you do that, chances of you being successful are very slim to none. So in my opinion, it is the coaches and the management. I kind of want to hear your thoughts, what you think the issue is with your boys, and what can they maybe do to, kind of improve those facets, or do you maybe have a coach in mind if they do decide to fire their coach?
Yeah, so right off the bat, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say that Mr. McDaniels, our head coach, the guy that took this team and was supposed to make them into one of the best teams in the NFL, is not that guy. Is he a six-time, Super Bowl winning coach? Yes. But he was a quarterback's coach. He was an assistant, an offensive assistant. This is all for the Patriots. And I'm not going to take away from his greatness because he was a part of that, but he coaches like he is a quarterback's coach or like he is a positions coach. He's a head coach who coaches like he is a positions coach. He is not the guy to get the job done. He showed that in Denver. He has shown that every time he has gotten a head coaching opportunity, which I will add has not been that much. He has been very much limited to his assistant coaching expertise because teams know that is what he is good for. I don't know why we thought that this was our guy, but this is not our guy. He was met with mid-season, and I thought we were going to fire him then and there, and that didn't happen. I will say this, was Gruden the guy? As a coach, I don't think so. As a guy, I don't think so. But as a coach, I still don't think he was the guy we needed. But I do think that we were in a better position with Gruden than we were with McDaniels. And I think that now where we are at because of McDaniels might make it harder for us to get that next big coach interested. I think we had a beautiful opportunity to get a big name coach interested, and we blew it with this signing. So I think it goes back to the coaching, but even above that, management. I think the Raiders are one of the most mismanaged organizations in sports history. And I'm a Raiders fan. Look at this. I can't make this up. I'm wearing the hat right now. And I'm saying that I think they're one of the most mismanaged organizations in sports history. And I think it's more now than ever. So unfortunately, it goes above the players. You have a beautiful, talented, strong roster, but you don't have the people up top to do it. But we can't put it all on the roster or all on the up top. The part that I will say is on the roster is the injuries, and that's not specifically on the roster. Those guys would give anything to be out there on the field and not injured. But the Raiders have suffered a lot of injuries and had a lot of problems. Currently the Raiders are not sitting in a very good spot, but looking at the rest of their record, they've got the not the Dolphins. They've got the Patriots and then the Steelers and then the 49ers and the Chiefs. That is not an easy way to finish your season, especially with how they've been struggling. But I will say this. I think this is a team talent-wise that could beat every one of those teams, whether that be the Patriots, the Steelers, the 49ers, or the Chiefs. But coaching-wise and management-wise, I'm not convinced that we can win that. And so if I had to, and I want you to also give your thoughts on this, but if I had to guess what they finished their last 4 games, I'm saying they beat the Patriots, they beat the Steelers, they lose to the 49ers, and lose to the Chiefs. So I have them going 2-2 in their last 4 games, finishing the season underwhelming. McDaniels is gone, and then we recoup from there. Maybe we look to a new quarterback, but I just don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is up top. So I think we go 2-2 in our last 4 games. What are your thoughts? What do you think we will pull off in our last little stint of the season?
I it's kind of hard to tell. Obviously, they just lost to the Rams. They're sitting at 5-8. They've got the Patriots, which it's a winnable game against the Patriots. Anybody can beat anybody, but they play the Steelers, they play the 49ers, and they play the Chiefs. The fact that they finished the season against the 49ers and the Chiefs is going to be very, very difficult to overcome. I think those are 2 very sure losses because the 49ers have shown they are quite possibly the best team in the NFL right now. The Chiefs, obviously, they don't need any introduction. They're going to be good as long as Mahomes is their quarterback. Steelers, I honestly think they can get the Steelers and the Patriots. So that puts them at 7-8, but I think they drop the last 2 to the 49ers and Chiefs.
And I'm with you on that. I don't see how it could get much better than that because this is a team that arguably shouldn't even be viewed as a team that could beat a team like the Patriots or the Steelers because those are both teams that have looked way better than them. But I think they're a team that can get it done. Somehow could they win their last 4 and somehow finish with success? Maybe, because I'm going to be honest, I thought if they beat the Rams, they could maybe make a playoff push and make a wild card game, but they fell to the Rams. We already talked about Mayfield. That's a big part of that because Mayfield's just great. He's great in those moments. He's a guy that's been there time and time again. We talked about him multiple times. He's a Heisman man. He's been there. He knows what it takes. So
Yep.
there's no taking away from the fact that that's who that loss is to, and that's a big part of the fact that the Raiders even lost. But it's up top. It's McDaniels. But looking at 2 other legends who are struggling, Tom Brady fell as we record today in an absolute blowout versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He came off of an impressive comeback against the Saints, but a very big loss. And then we're also looking at Green Bay Packers quarterback, your man, Aaron Rodgers, who is coming off of just not a very solid season as a whole, but he is coming off of that win versus the Bears and then that bye week, moving on to the Rams Monday Night Football, of course. So, still plenty of season left for both of these guys. But my question to you, and I think a big question is 2 things. One, it's looking like both of the writing's on the wall, I think, for both of them. I think missing the playoffs is more than likely going to happen. But my question to you is, do you think if they miss the playoffs, I'm going to give you three scenarios. One, they retire. Two, they stick with their team and they try to figure it out. Or three, they go to a completely different organization to try to make one last push for a championship. So tell me both of these guys, what do you think is going to happen if and when they miss the playoffs? Do you think they're going to retire, give it another shot, try to make it work, and pull in some free agents and make some trades? Or do you think they're headed to a new organization to try to make one last push? What are your thoughts in the future for these legends?
It's kind of an interesting conversation to have. Because as we all have heard from Tom Brady, he even alluded to it, fairly recently. Retirement's not in the cards for him right now. So I think with Tom Brady, I think the more, likely scenario is he finds a new home somewhere. But the Buccaneers are not out of the playoff race at all. They are in the worst division in the NFL. They still sit up top, I think, by a game against just ahead of the Carolina Panthers. So they could still make the playoffs. Now with Rodgers is kind of an interesting case because he can retire as like while he didn't win all the championships and stuff, he's still going to be one of the more successful quarterbacks in NFL history. He's already a Hall of Famer, has numerous MVPs, has a Super Bowl under his belt. But I honestly think if the Packers don't make it, he might even try and find a new home. I don't know if retirement's quite on the cards for him. It's kind of hard to think that he's going to stick around to see if he can right the ship here in Green Bay. I want him to because I think as we all as we have all seen, when Aaron Rodgers is on, the Green Bay Packers are on. So he is the heart and soul of that football team. So I don't know, man. It's kind of interesting. I'm kind of banking on Tom Brady, you know, going another direction, maybe finding a change of scenery to go play for somebody else, maybe even lead them to the promised land. Or, well, and also maybe Aaron Rodgers kind of sticking it out in Green Bay, seeing if they can get some draft picks under their belt and maybe see if they can right this ship. Because before this year, in Matt LaFleur's first two seasons as the NFL head coach of the Green Bay Packers, they went 13-3 both years and lost in the NFC Championship. So it's not necessarily a bad team. They just need to get weapons to help Aaron Rodgers out.
And I'm with you on that. I do think that this Packers team could grow into it, but I think Rodgers and Brady are both looking for new environments. And here's what I'm going to say for Brady. I think he's going to end up in San Francisco. There are so many people saying that Shanahan match would not be a good fit. But I mean, they are absolutely assembling a super team in San Francisco, and I don't think that we as NFL fans have even really fully grasped that because we're all caught up this season. But McCaffrey, Debo, these are great players, and Brady could make that team unstoppable. So Brady and a couple other players could make that team a dynasty. So I think that Brady's going to end up in San Francisco. I think the most likely landing spot for Brady going forward is San Francisco. But I want to throw kind of a curveball in the mix and say maybe we see him reunite to New England. I don't think that is 100% something that would happen. And this is what I want to say. If he goes back to New England, I think he brings some big names back into the game. Maybe we see an Edelman come back. Maybe we see a Gronkowski come back. I think we'd see a lot of reunions happen if he came out of retirement. not came out of retirement, but came back to the Patriots. Do I think that's going to happen? If he comes back and, takes out that jersey again, do I think that's very possible? No, but I think that is the alternative spot I see him going to is definitely the Patriots. So, I think the 49ers are going to be his new home. And I think that's closer to being a done deal than we know. I think that both sides have communicated, and I think he's going to end up there. And that young quarterback for the 49ers looked great, but they're going to take Brady over that kid any day, just because Brady brings more on the marketing side and the success side than any other quarterback can. So I think Brady's going to be a 49er, but we might see him come back and bring some other players with him out of retirement to New England. I think it's possible. I think New England is a curveball thrown in there. But when we talk about Aaron Rodgers, I only see two possible things happening. One, I see him, like you said, sticking it out and staying with Green Bay. He's not going to retire. Aaron Rodgers is a guy that's going to retire on his own say. And I don't think that him retiring now would be on his own say. Him retiring now would be him retiring because people are saying Aaron Rodgers doesn't have what it takes anymore to lead a team to the promised land. He still does. This team can develop / it's Aaron Rodgers. It's Green Bay. It's a legendary environment. They are going to bring in players that want to play with Aaron Rodgers after this season. I really think Green Bay just had one season in between, losing players like Adams, reshaping certain things. I think they'll be back in the mix next season in the playoffs. But let me give you an alternative. An alternative I see happening: Aaron Rodgers to the Raiders.
Oh God.
So I know you don't want to hear that. I know you
Absolutely not. No. I don't I want the Raiders to be okay, but not with Rodgers at
but
the
not
helm.
with
That would
Rodgers.
just that
You'd have
would
both of your guys then.
that would make me absolutely throw up.
No, I mean, we would have both of your boys then, but this is why I say that. The reason I say it is because we already have Adams. And I think that Rodgers doesn't want to play in an environment where he doesn't have his boys. And I don't think he has his boys in Green Bay. Obviously, I just alluded to the fact that I think the most logical thing is he stays in Green Bay and they figure it out and they get some players in the offseason and they build up a team to go back to where they need to get to. People forget he was just making a deep playoff run. Aaron Rodgers is still that guy in a lot of ways. It's just been a big turnover year. So I think that we're going to see them turn around and have more consistency next season either way. But I also could see him going to the Raiders for the sole fact that they have Adams. They have that core built up. If the Raiders make a move and get a solid new head coach who expresses that Carr is not in his future, because Derek Carr has somehow, and I'm a Raiders fan, and I think Carr is great, but I'm going to be honest and say the blunt, honest truth. Derek Carr has somehow been a Raider this whole time. And I say somehow because he hasn't brought us to an AFC championship. He hasn't brought us past a wild card. Not all his fault, but I'm almost ready to move on from Carr. And what a great way to move on than with a player like Rodgers. Do I think that is super realistic? No. But if he doesn't stay a Packer, I think instead of retirement, the next possible thing I see him doing is becoming a Raider. But both of these players are great. They're legends, and neither of them are done. Brady's not done, and I don't think that Rodgers is done either. And the Bucks could still very well be out there. They could maybe make a wild card game somehow. They're still in it because of where their division's at. But I think both of these players are going to miss the playoffs and reevaluate their futures. And maybe we see them suiting up for new teams next season. But either way, time will tell. We'll have plenty more offseason buzz to talk about that stuff. But one of the last things we're going to go over tonight is the Detroit Lions, a team that started, I think we can both agree that they started very, very, very underwhelmingly slow. I think that this Lions team, obviously they were on Hard Knocks and they had that, time to, kind of show us who they were, moral wise and team wise. But when we saw them start, I think they were really underwhelming. But this Lions team just got done beating the Vikings, which are one of the best teams in the NFL currently. And this Lions team handled business pretty well, even when the Vikings tried to make a last-second push. So my question to you is, do you think this Dan Campbell-led Lions team is the real deal? Not so much this season, Not so much right now, but do you think Campbell can make them into a real deal NFC competitive team, or are they just having success and pulling off last second victories? And my second question is, do you think they will make the playoffs this season and be a team that we will at least see in the wild card? Is this Dan Campbell led team the real deal?
I honestly think yes. Um, they are the real deal. They're playing a good brand of football right now. They're really good on the defensive side of the ball, and they have a good offense. They're doing a lot of really good things, which is leading them to being second place in the NFC North right now. They just knocked off the first place Vikings in a pretty dominant fashion. So, yeah, I think it's the real deal. And I think they are up there for the wild card spot. Um, whether do I think that they're going to get it? They're going to need some help to get there. But do I think it's absolutely possible? Yes. Do I think it's the most likely outcome? No, I don't. Um, as far as future goes, I think Dan Campbell is going to have these guys playing at a pretty good level, and I think they are going to be a pretty competitive team in terms of getting into the playoffs for the next few seasons if they keep drafting well and developing the players that they have. Because what has been one of the things that I've been alluding to this entire time? It's development, and they've done a pretty decent job throughout this season after a slow start developing the players that they have, and now they're playing a pretty good brand of football. So if they can continue on that, I think they can be a playoff competitor for years to come if they could continue to play at this level. What are your thoughts?
I think absolutely. I mean, within their last 6 games, they've gone 5-1, and they've shown us. I mean, they've beat the Packers, they've beat the Giants, they competed against the Bills. That's that loss that I alluded to. So this Lions team can compete. Their last 4 games of the season, they've got the Jets, the Panthers, the Bears, and the Packers. And I'm sorry, man. I know you're a Packers guy, but I think they could go 4-0 in those games. I think they could beat the Packers. They've already beat them. Was that a low-scoring game that doesn't reflect how good the Packers actually are this season? Yeah, of course. The Packers are a way better team than what they showed. But this Lions team could get it done. Do I think that they're a wild card team 100%? 100 at 100% no. That's my reaction to that. If you say that they're a 100% shoe in for the wild card, you're kidding yourself. There's still plenty of football left, and they very well could lose to the Jets. They very well could lose to the Bears. They very well could lose to the Packers. I don't know who's losing to the Panthers right now, but I don't think it could even be the Lions. So they'll at least beat the Lions, or they'll at least, well, yeah, they'll at least beat themselves. That's what we've seen. But no, they'll at least beat the Panthers pretty easily. And I think they can beat the Bears, and I think they can beat the Jets, and I think they can beat the Packers. But even if they drop one of those games, I still think they could find themselves in the playoffs. But I see this team being 4-0 and being that team that I think Dan Campbell has been showing us that they are, and showing us that they are that team that is that last second team that just barely makes it, but they're still a real team. And I think that they're one of those teams that could make it. So I think that the future in Detroit is bright. I think that they need to reevaluate their quarterback position. Of course, Goff has been a Super Bowl contending quarterback. He's been successful, but I think that the quarterback position in Detroit is where they need to start looking future wise. So I think they've got some adjustments to make, but I think that this Lions team is absolutely the real deal. And I want to see them in the playoffs because I think this is a hard nosed football program that could very well take a team to the next level. So, congrats to this Lions team. Another big win. This Vikings win arguably was their biggest one. Yes, they won bigger last, week, but they beat a pretty, lackluster Jaguars team, better than last year, but not what they should be. So this Lions team is by far looking good, and they beat one of the best teams. But before we finish off for the day, we have one more topic to cover, and I think we've covered this pretty. I think I would say we've covered this a lot, and it's been a topic that has been covered throughout this show. But you cannot talk about football without talking about Odell Beckham Jr. And it has recently came in that the Cowboys have doubts about signing him because they don't think he'll be ready. So my question to you is, Lots of people say players can't come back from having two of the injuries that man has had. It's hard to come back from one, but coming back from two of the same injury or similar injuries is very difficult. So, do you think that Odell Beckham Jr. can come back and be an explosive playmaker to help bring a team to the championship? And two, do you see Odell Beckham Jr. not getting signed this season and getting a bigger long-term contract with a team that will have him around and have him healthier, in the offseason? So do you see him landing on a team yet this season, or do you think he'll wait and be signed to a team later? And even if he's signed now or later, do you think he'll be the same player, or at least close to the same player that he was even in the Super Bowl last year?
It's very two interesting questions. It all depends on if he stays healthy, right? Because as we all see, a healthy Odell Beckham Jr. is a pretty dangerous weapon for any offense. So that's the answer to my first question. Do I think he's going to be the same player, if he decides to come back? Absolutely. I think he's going to be a really good wide receiver for anybody who picks him up. He's a really good possession wide receiver. He gets pretty decent yards after the catch. He is very shifty. But then to answer your second question, it is very, very difficult to come back from the two injuries that he had, and be the same player. Very rarely do you see somebody come back from two very major knee injuries and be the same player. But do I think, after a while that Odell can probably get back? Yes. Do I still think he's going to be a good wide receiver for whoever picks him up? Yes. But it all banks on if he stays healthy. The third thing is, do I think he's going to get picked up? Well, it's going to be very tough because he just came out and said that he has no interest at all coming back during the regular season. He just wants to come back for the playoffs. That's going to be a large turnoff for a bunch of other teams because you got to build that cohesion with your teammates and stuff through the regular season, because that cohesion is going to carry you a lot in the playoffs. And if you're just coming back in the playoffs where you could be one and done, it could be very detrimental. So those are kind of my thoughts on the whole thing. What are yours?
So yeah, I'm gonna say this. I think Odell Beckham Jr. is always going to be a player that brings a lot of star power and a lot of commercial, you know, esque to teams. He's a commercialized player. He's a legend. He had that catch. He had plenty of catches, even just his rookie year, that were legendary and unreal. And he's a great player. But the problem with Odell Beckham Jr. is no player has made a big recovery like he has, or at least he's tried to, from these injuries. No player has had the number of injuries he's had, or the same injury and the same surgery in the same situation and been the same player. But I think Odell Beckham Jr. is that one guy that could possibly be that guy to make a full recovery, because that guy is an alien. The catches he's made, the things he can do, he is not from this world. So I
It's
would not
incredible.
be shocked. It's unbelievable. He is one of the flashiest athletes ever, not just football, not just of the last 20 years, ever. One of the most gifted, flashy athletes. And the fact that he caught a Super Bowl touchdown, I was so happy for him. I'm not a Rams guy. I've never been a Giants guy, who luckily they've not had success since the Eli Manning days. But still, I've always been an Odell guy because of who he is. And I think he's an exciting part of teams. And I think he's going to come back and be great. Now, here's my thing. I think a big part of Odell Beckham Jr. dragging his feet is what I'm going to call it, because that's what it looks like, at least in the process of coming back, is I think he wants to be in the best situation possible. I think he jumped the gun with Cleveland, and that was not great. I don't think he jumped the gun with LA because he won a championship, and I think he would have been back, and that would have helped him have more success right off the bat. But I don't think that was obviously the long-term answer for him in his career. So I think that it's time for him to have that exclamation point comeback. He doesn't need a comeback, but he needs to come back to the sport and show us who he is. So I don't think he's going to come back this season, and I don't know if he's going to even if we're going to see him in the playoffs. I think that this is what's going to happen. We will see him sign to a surprise team such as a Bills or a Vikings or even potentially a Giants. I don't think the Giants may even have that playoff spot. So I think that I've narrowed it down to the Bills or the Vikings, but I don't think he's going to sign to the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys have made it known that they don't want to place all their chips on a player that might not be back completely for them. They need consistency and they need efficiency, and that might not be Odell. So I don't think we'll see him suit up as a Cowboy. What these are the two scenarios. One, I think we see him sign with the Bills or the Vikings and be ready for that playoff run. Or two, I think we will see him become a Giant or a Cowboy long term after this season. So I think that if we see him sign with a team this year, it'll be either the Vikings or the Bills for that playoff juice that those teams both need. Or we'll see him hold off and become a Giant or a Cowboy and sign a pretty lucrative contract and probably retire with whatever city he signs with. So either way, Odell's going to win. I think he's going to have a great comeback, and I think we'll see him contribute to a championship. I think we'll see Odell be a 2 championship guy before he's done. I just think he has to decide, do you come back and pick a team that might take a chance on you, or do you wait until the off season? And I don't know. I can see him doing both things, but either way, he'll be successful. But either way, we're going to have some great things to talk about, and we'll definitely retouch on that once he signs, no matter when that is.
Absolutely. As always, this has been another wonderful episode. I appreciate all of our listeners, and I look forward to our next episode. If you guys have any questions that you would like us to answer, go ahead and post the questions on the Twitter page or post it up on our Facebook when we put our post up. Um, Again, I appreciate you guys all for listening. We both do, and we will see you guys next time.